We've got 4,500 sinks in the city, and they all need to be clogged immediately.
We're going to flood them with blue water.
Flood them all with aqua.
Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes hotter than hot, tasty pancakes. Yes, our gun, it fires true. There's nothing better than our boys in blue. If this is your first time to Pop-O-Holics, thanks for joining it.
Is that what we're going with? Got 21 intros. You got to shut them all down.
We got 21 intros. We got to shut them all down. Nothing in, nothing out. Tunnels out of the pod. Shut them down. If this is your first time to this show, welcome. So happy to have you. I'm your host, Christian, and I'm joined as always by my two best friends,
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
And what do we do on this podcast? Well, we have our weekly uploads. You can check those out on YouTube or the main podcast feed. We also theme our months around an upcoming release or around something significant in pop culture. This month, we are remembering the late, the great Chadwick Boseman. Is a year since his passing. We covered Get On Up, as well as 42 in previous episodes. And now we're taking a decidedly different turn. This week, we are covering 21 Bridges.
Your father died protecting this city.
Freeze, Jack! Halt!
He taught you to follow your conscience in an often cruel world.
What happened?
Worst day in 18 years.
How many cops?
8.
Why were they here?
They responded to a robbery.
Shot fired! Shot fired! Officer down!
Automatic weapons, 2 shooters. They have training.
How old were you when your father's captain came? I asked for you for a reason.
I will find out.
We just killed cops. You need to run.
We gotta move fast. Cars not ours, plates are stolen.
If we don't catch these guys in the next 3 or 4 hours, they vanish.
How you gonna do this?
Close the island. There are 21 bridges in and out of Manhattan. Shut them down. 3 rivers, close them. 4 tunnels, block them. Stop every train and loop the subways. Then, we flood the island with blue.
You know, as cops do. That is from the trailer of 21 Bridges. It is directed by Brian Kirk, written by Adam Mervis and Matthew Michael Carnahan. God, my vision's going here. The score by Henry Jackman and Alex Belcher. With a budget of $33 million, it grossed $50 million. And it stars Chadwick Boseman as Andre Davis, Christian Isaiah as young Andre Davis, Sienna Miller as Frankie Burns, J.K. Simmons as Captain McKenna, Stephen James as Michael Trujillo, and Taylor Kitsch as Ray Jackson, as well as Keith David. Can't be forgotten. Keith David, wonderful voice actor that man is. I love when he shows up. He's got the same exact personality, same exact voice, and I'm here.
It's great in Mass Effect.
I'm in it 100%. Also in he was also in that Darren Aronofsky film that I love, Requiem for a Dream. It's like it ain't out just to look pretty. Anyway, what are we gonna be talking about? What are we gonna be talking about? Our overall non-spoiler thoughts of 21 Bridges, and then we're gonna jump right into spoilers. So you'll get a quick impression from us. We're gonna talk about cop movies in this day and age. Post a lot of stuff that's happened in the conversations around law enforcement and the way that we deal with things in the United States. I think you can't treat cop movies the same in this era. Is this movie saying anything particular about law enforcement? We'll then talk about our favorite moments from the film and close out with final thoughts. So with that, let's jump right into it and talk about overall thoughts. Chris, let's start with you. Your overall thoughts on 21 Bridges.
So I want to start by saying that trailer made me really want to see the movie when it was first released. You know, we had just come off Infinity War and Black Panther, and Chadwick Boseman was like a hot commodity at that point. And this movie looked awesome when I watched the trailer. It was also the first film coming out of the Russo brothers' new production studio, so that intrigued me to see, what this film was going to be like. I have now seen this movie twice. Once when Chadwick Boseman passed last year, and then again for this episode. And I have to say that I really do enjoy Chadwick Boseman's performance in this movie, despite the quality of the script. I think overall this movie is a very standard action cop thriller. And there are moments where the script is a little cliche and the dialogue is kind of silly and over the top. And despite all that, I still really enjoy the performance. But it's not the strongest film that we've watched this month.
Yeah, I think we'll all agree that if listeners want, we reviewed Get On Up and 42, and we're all roundly positive, having our foibles with each of the movies, but I especially loved Get On Up, and I really like 42. Chris was not present for the 42 episode because it was about baseball.
But I did watch it.
He did watch it, but it was about,
and I enjoyed it.
About baseball, and he said, I don't want to be in a podcast about baseball. But we had a lot of great thoughts, me and Brian did, about that movie. And, Chris, I'm going to land very much in a similar territory to you. Although I think I'm probably going to come off the most positive about this film because I think it's a fine action cop movie. It feels like it's from a different time. It really does not feel like a 2019 production. In fact, when I found out that it was from 2019, I was appalled because I said, "Oh, this felt like a movie that a script had been sitting around for 20 years and that they remade recently, right? And it even feels even more dated." So there's just so much dated stuff, and we're going to get into a lot of that as we go on through the podcast. But, as for a standard action movie, I think Chadwick Boseman comes across as a great leading actor. I really think he elevates even the poor writing to a place where I was honestly interested the whole way through as far as being engaged in the action. I think the action...
The movie's definitely entertaining.
Yeah, I think the movie's entertaining through and through. I think it's a little tropey, but the action set pieces are really well choreographed. There's nothing that takes me out of the movie as far as the way anything's framed. I think it's intimate in a smart way where they kind of build up to this grand idea of shutting down the island, and I don't think it reaches that full potential of full lockdown of Manhattan. But I do believe it captures a lot of interesting elements and kind of gets into weird John Wicky territory without going too crazy. I do think there are some things in this movie that are smartly put as far as character development that I actually really appreciated, that I know me and Brian are going to talk about in more detail as we go on and when we get into spoilers, that I actually found interesting and creative ideas for characters and an overall message to the film. But I overall think it's fine. It's I don't think you'll be bored. I think especially this is a perfect dad movie to throw on with you and the old man. I would show my dad this movie and watch it with him. As far as it's an old school type of movie that maybe doesn't work as well through 2020 lenses. I get in 2021 lenses. What year is it? I don't even know. It's been a blur. But yeah, I think it's just fine. It's definitely I think we're all going to agree it's the weakest movie in Chadwick Boseman's canon that we've covered, and I think that's all on the script, and that's really it. That's where the failure is just not doing anything new or interesting, and as we may find, maybe slightly problematic in this day and age. So moving on, Brian, what are your overall thoughts of 21 Bridges?
So yeah, I'll say up front that upon first watch, I watched this movie twice because I was very harsh on it the first time, and we got into some moderately heated debate about what this movie is saying and the implications of it. But let me start off with a few positives. I agree that Chadwick Boseman is really great in this movie. I think the main flaws with it for me are come from the writing. I agree that the action choreography, it's got the climactic scene of the movie is a whole lot of fun, and I really enjoyed rewatching it and appreciated it probably even more on second watch. So I think all of that's fine. The shootouts and all of that stuff, well done. The action's easily understandable. J.K. Simmons, always going to be a pleasure to have him on screen delivering some silly lines.
But he sells it. And
no, he does. He definitely does.
Just get J.K. Simmons to say it and it'll be fine. It'll take me. It'll take this whole movie's The Departed light. It's a bad version of The Departed in so many different ways. But J.K. Simmons is awesome in it. He's really great.
While we're talking about J.K. Simmons, and this goes for everyone in the film, in my personal opinion, there are moments throughout the film where I question what regional accent they're using, because it takes place in New York City, but there are moments where J.K. Simmons is talking and I'm like, is that a Boston accent? Like, what's happening right now? So, I mean, that's something that pulled me in and out
accents
of the flick.
Aren't consistent.
I
believe I described this movie
are hard.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but I described this movie as the quote unquote New York pizza New York movie, where it's just
it's so New York, dude. I'll talk about when we're in spoilers.
But the accents are a big part of that. That kind of will pull you out. But J.K. Simmons overall, it doesn't matter. His accents going in and out. It doesn't matter. J.K. Simmons, he's great.
Yeah, I will say, as far as I thought in accents as well, Sienna Miller's character, Frankie Burns, she was doing a voice, and I think it's partially just she's got some bad lines to deliver as well. But that kind of maybe took me out a little bit at times. So moving into kind of like overall opinions, I don't think this is the movie is fine as far as movies go. It's got a couple of cinematic moments that I'll get to in spoilers that I really appreciated. Ultimately, and we'll get into a deeper discussion about movies about cops. Watching this movie in 2021, 2020 was a very chaotic year in a lot of ways in terms of social justice movements and otherwise. And it's hard to not view this, for me, through a political lens. So the way I read this movie, and you guys may feel differently, I think we are supposed to think that Chadwick Boseman's a good cop. Would you guys agree with that? Ultimately,
I do. Yeah,
I think that I do think the movie's a little deeper than maybe you give it credit for. I think that he's haunted, right? I think he's traumatized.
Okay. So ultimately, I think this movie is trying to say something about the police force, and I think because our main character, I think, if we're going to have a cop as a protagonist who we're supposed to like, I think we need to shoot higher in terms of what type of characters we want to present as the ideal cop. So
no pun intended. Shoot higher.
Oh, yes. So, but yeah, I think ultimately this is my issue with the movie, is that it's not spoilers to say Chadwick Boseman's character, it's revealed in the first 10 minutes of the movie, is someone who is known for killing perpetrators. He's killed 8 in the last 9 years. And with the given state of the world, as well as some specific lines in this movie that I'll bring up later, for our hero to be someone who is known for and proud of getting away with killing people outside of the justice system, we just got to aim higher in terms of who we're looking up to and what policing should be in our culture.
In the defense of the movie, just specifically to the character of Chadwick Boseman, his father was a police officer who was gunned down by a criminal, right?
I'm going to say it here. Don't get into a job because you have vengeful feelings about a death in the family either. Probably not the best motivation to
I would
get
agree.
into policing.
I agree with that.
No, but that is part of his character, right? It's not like
exact. But my point is that I think we have to shoot higher in terms of who we're looking up to as good cops and what the baseline for a good cop is. And I think it should be a good bit more than Chadwick Boseman's character in this movie personally. But with that being said, as a movie, like you guys said, it's enjoyable on a base level. I think the writing is very tropey and cliched, sometimes to legitimately problematic levels. But that's a lot of police movies, maybe. But yeah, so I will say Chadwick Boseman's very great. I think Stephen James as Michael Trujillo has a strong emotional moment as well that I'll get to in spoilers that was really well played. So there's some stuff to like here.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to spoilers. We got some interesting conversations to get into. Spoilers for 21 Bridges starting now. Brian, we had a lot of discussion on our chat in preparation for the pod about what we'd send the conversation around. And what I found really fascinating, you brought up a great point about a piece of dialogue, a scene in LA Confidential about cops' portrayal in the media. So I'd like for you to share that perspective and ask the question, can we view procedural cop stories through the same lens as we kind of go on and think about pop culture and the way the American police force in particular is portrayed?
for me personally, I think it's just always important to remember the historical situation around this stuff, right? So you can look it up. There are articles about there from the beginning of Hollywood, the integration of law enforcement, the FBI, the government in Hollywood has been pretty much there from the beginning. So things like Dragnet were one of the first examples of police procedural shows where you had police involved with a level of script control of what could be shown. And this has absolutely propagated through because you get access to equipment, you get access to information, to ostensibly how they sell it is to make it more realistic to cops. But what this ultimately becomes to a large degree is a pseudo propaganda arm to present police in a certain way in the public eye. And that started, in the 50s and has gone forward. Similar stuff with the military in Hollywood as well, in movies and TV. So I think it's always important to remember that whether it be through self-censorship or actual involvement with the police, there are pressures put on productions to say or not say, more importantly, certain things about groups of people. To this movie's credit, it shows wide-scale corruption in multiple branches, and I think my issue is it kind of gives everyone a little bit too convenient of a narrative and justification for the whole thing and doesn't take that extra step to get to the heart of policing culture generally. But it is trying. And like I said, I was very harsh about some things, but I just think it's always important to contextualize this stuff in the context of how police have been presented in media. And a lot of times historically, they've had an involvement that is going to slant the public views to make them more sympathetic when on the ground things may look very significantly different. An easy example, police procedurals like Law and Order, for example. Most episodes, you have a cut and dry. Not only does the crime get solved, but you get a convenient and understandable motive as well. So it's like crimes generally don't get solved. The more harsh the crime, right, the less often they get solved, right? Or that may not be true, but murders I feel like are probably nationally like under 50% or like
murder
around 50%.
Solve rate isn't
in terms
excellent.
Right. So that's one thing, right? Presenting cops as ridiculously capable and good at their jobs. This is for me, a political statement in itself, and maybe at odds with what's actually happening on the ground. To this movie's credit again, when cops are killed, because of the fraternal nature of this, what the movie says, if you're wearing that badge, I've got your back, which just in terms of how, in my opinion, policing should be. Chadwick Boseman, this is a classic trope in television and movies as well, the cop who will do anything he wants to sign the case or to solve the case, and internal affairs,
no matter who it
back.
Brings down.
Yeah, exactly. But internal affairs is always just treated as this burden, as this joke. The characters in this movie think of due process as something to avoid at all costs. Even Boseman, seemingly, for the most part, outside of him getting information that he's looking for. So now I'm getting into other topics. But as I said, I think it's always important to think about the historical involvement of police, how they're presented, and to let that bring context to what the movie is ultimately trying to say or not trying to say and saying implicitly.
I think it's a valid argument. I had this realization when I replayed Mass Effect. For those who don't know, Mass Effect is like a sci-fi role-playing game. You meet a lot of great characters, and I played it when I was very young. And playing it again, there's a character called Garrus, who is this alien who comes from the basically Interpol of international international space relations, right? He's on this space international alien diplomatic site, right? Where there's a lot of different cultures and stuff that come together, and he ran security for them. And he's like, do anything. I hate all the red tape. There's a bad guy. I gotta shoot him. And I remember I replayed the game and was like, Garrus is fucked up, authoritarian and fascist, borderline of what
he's going through some shit.
He's going through some stuff, and I just never saw in that lens, right? So I think visiting things with a perspective is important. So I don't hate you for that, Chris. You watched this movie. Inherently, what political elements did you see this through in the context of kind of what the country's gone through in the last few years?
So I agree with Brian that it's important to recognize how police media has been utilized in the past in this country as like a pseudo propaganda machine, as you've mentioned. And it's not just, the police. In terms of like military, you've directors specifically that work with the military to utilize technology and vehicles and stuff like that, but they have to...
Michael Bay.
Yeah, yep. Now, he's the exact person I was thinking about.
But most MCU movies as well.
Yeah, they have to, sometimes portray the military in positive lights to get access to said material for their films. And that's not the most positive thing in the entire world, But the question we have here written in the show notes is every cop movie now inherently making political statements? And the conversation that Brian and I had earlier was that I think the answer is a little mixed in that, of course, you're going to bring your own personal and national context to any type of police material that has come out after 2014. But then you also have the intent of the creators and the movie that they're trying to make or the product that they're trying to make. And the argument that, the conversation Brian and I were having earlier is like, is that bias or is that context with 2021 eyes inherently a part of the material? Or should we take into consideration what the actual creators are trying to say first? So my opinion here is kind of mixed. I don't actually believe that... I think the intention of the creators should always be taken into account first and foremost. It's important to bring what Brian was saying into the context of the film as well. But I don't necessarily believe that a product, especially one dealing with the police department, is inherently trying to make a political statement. But I think through the context of what we're bringing to film and what we're bringing to television, based on what's happening in the real world, we ourselves bring political context to media. What I was saying earlier with our conversation is that I don't believe that this movie's... I'm going to be very rude about this movie right now. It's similar to what I was saying about Fast Five or any of the Fast movies, but I don't believe this movie is like good enough or smart enough to be actively trying to state something political. However, we've experienced things in the real world and we're seeing things on the film screen. And yes, we're going to bring political opinions to media like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm
like, I don't think the product inherently, like, I don't think it's not an inherent part of the product's existence always. There are certain instances in which it is, like what you were talking about earlier, Brian, like any type of media that has to be filtered through the police department to be approved, 100%, there's political context that's an inherent part of what this product is. I don't know if 21 Bridges is that thing. I think 21 Bridges is more of just a standard action flick that they were trying to make. But I wasn't in the creative room,
right?
So I can't speak to that, And we even had a conversation about how, like, even at the table, creators can have different opinions of what they want their product to be. So you could have, Brian Kirk here just wanting to make an action movie and just wanting it to entertain people. But then you could have the writers saying, I do want to make a political statement about law enforcement in America. So you have conflicting opinions about what the product represents.
And then you have the actors,
even the creators.
Which on this, I watched some interviews, and it was like they worked on the script with the actors to like change character motivations and move stuff around. I know Chadwick Boseman was like vocal about like, yeah, we were like trying to find the character and we changed some stuff. Like, for instance, the Franklin character was originally, Frankie Burns was originally Frank. So that was originally a male character, right? And they had changed the script. And it was based off, like, I think an older script that was of a similar ilk.
That was written 20 years ago?
It was written a long time ago, yeah. No. And yeah, to my point, feels as such. And I think just to piggyback off of you, Chris, I think the movie I think both of you are very right. The movie is indicative of a culture of how we've, treated, talking about police in this country and abroad, right? We get this with Chinese cinema too. Like I think back to the Chow Yun-fat. Is that his name, right? The Hard Boiled. Is that Chow Yun-fat? I believe so. Okay,
not sure.
Either way, but the Hong Kong police John Woo film, Hard Boiled, which is great. It's awesome, but it's like a cop that's just like tearing up the streets. It's like a classic trope. Like looking through the context, if you look at Clint Eastwood films of him being like the only sheriff in town, like
right,
the hard long cock of the law. It's like a classic trope of literature and film that goes of like who's going to bring justice to this town. And in this country, where you go is the police are the long arm of the law. And I think inherently, yeah, like if you look at politically lensed view of cop procedurals, there's this element of having to like, have some like respect. But at the end of the day, it's such a tricky situation, and I don't want to sound like a fucking puppet for the state. But if you are enforcing the law, my political beliefs, just to get them out there, is that you should have a very diverse set of like law enforcement agencies that are like things that involve needing to have people ready for combat, and also people ready to handle mental health issues, and also people that are ready to handle domestic dispute issues. And like you should like build out a force of like emergency services that are very diverse and helpful to your community.
Yeah, it shouldn't be all the same people.
And it shouldn't be just like everybody in body armor armed to like show up because there's like a cat stuck in a tree or a homeless person somewhere, right? I think there's a lot of great nuanced conversations we can have that this country is just not prepared for systematically to have. So yes, 100% correct. But in the general context of like what works in like pop culture film, usually it's good guy, bad guy, right? And then the mix of movies like this, which is like, wow, 1970s filmmaking, which is like, what if the good guys are also bad guys? And that's about as deep structurally and philosophically this film gets. It just is under the lens of a lot of the stuff that we've dealt with in the past few years. And I think Chadwick Boseman, to his credit and to working with writers, brings a deep character of like where, I came off of it after hearing, Brian, your reaction going, wow, I'm like in for it. And it's going to be very like Starship. I bring up Starship Troopers a lot. I brought it in like even this recording session. That is like military. It's like a satire of military propaganda. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a really great movie. You should check it out. I was expecting like a silly almost satirical version, but actually like trying to straightforward of like a cop movie. And I didn't get that. I really didn't get that. I got Chadwick Boseman bringing like a semblance of like being stuck familiar, like through family into this profession that is like already a thwart profession of trying to help. And systems like our main protagonist are ex-military, which I felt rewarded because I was watching the film and I watched that first opening action scene. I said, those people are ex-military because of the way they're moving, but that guy's got a lot more experience and definitely is a lot more cold-blooded, definitely has seen a lot more tours. And the film like rewards that. It's like, yes, this is a combat hardened person that's been trained to kill and is honestly suffering from PTSD. And this other person that joined for very similar reasons to our protagonist into the line of profession that he was in, because he suffered a loss in the family. And you've got kind of a Tale of Two Cities type of parallels going through who's technically a good guy and who's technically a bad guy with bullshit on both sides. And you have Chadwick Boseman's character, who clearly has done a lot of like shitty stuff in like trying to fill a gap of loss that he has, and he sees himself in a criminal and decides not to do what he normally does and root out corruption within his own organization. And like both of them are from failed systems, and like the movie isn't insanely deep and it's not insanely nuanced about all this stuff, but I do believe ultimately, if I was to be like, what did all the artistic people, that like all the writer, director, and actors come together and find, was a tale of cyclical violence between the states of authority and states of criminality, of like the system is failing all these people repeatedly, right? So when I watch the film personally, I see the system of law enforcement, I see the system of the military and crime, I see them all failing simultaneously. And I think what proves it to me as far as where everybody's head was at was that Chadwick Boseman, although he is like Brian, you're putting up to be like on a pedestal. It's like, this is like, oh, we're supposed to root for him, right? And I get that. Like, he's the main character. He's capable. We love capable people in film. We love people he's like the smartest guy in the room. That's awesome to watch in any profession, anything that we're watching a film about someone who's really good at their job. Like, I don't think the film itself and everybody involved is trying to say like all cops are like this good. Like, I don't think it's that bad to where it's be like just default he's a cop. I think it's showing someone who's like breaks his own cycle, like personally, not in context of the police, breaks his own cycle of violence to find deeper meaning, and at the end of the day is left like depressed and left unsure of himself. He's not happy at the end. We don't get a lot of heroism yet. He cuffs and spares his partner Frankie, and he's surrounded by police at the end, but he looks despaired. He looks like he's very sad that he had to kill fellow police officers, members of his force. He felt very sad that the person that was stuck in the situation, the system that he was stuck in, I think he saw a lot of himself in that. And I think to just view this movie through a political lens, not that it's not important, not that you're not shedding good context that I appreciate immensely, but that like the film itself and what they found with the character of Chadwick Boseman's character, like if he was a criminal, if he was part of a different org, we would see it in a different context. Like, I think what they found was that someone that within a system found like the flaw in the failure of the system at the end just was a cyclical nature of violence between, you know, what is considered criminals that are could have been war heroes, you know, in other contexts politically would have been considered war heroes, you know, if they had like saved a child, it'd been like, well, he was a veteran of Iraq, right? Or whatever it was. So, you know, even through those political lenses, I still like found myself going, well, what they found was just a story about systems failing people. In essence, I think opposite of kind of where you're coming at it is like it's kind of anti-authoritarian in that way. I don't know if you see it that way or if that makes any sense. The movie's not perfect. It's not an insanely deep movie, but I think where they landed on as a whole leaves them a little less culpable than maybe you're attacking it from a political angle. What do you think?
Yeah, I think everything you're saying about the connections in character is there. You know, there are things that pay off. I think to one of the strongest emotional moments, I think, is, and I was really conflicted about it when I heard the line at first, and she doesn't come back after like 5 minutes, but we see his mother who has like dementia or something and tells him that he's looking in the eye of the devil. And that line comes back to a cop. That was unexpected. I will say. But the thing for me is that it's because the baseline that it sets for Chadwick Boseman's character, I guess I just don't, his character is completely unbelievable to me. I do not imagine this person actually exists. Someone who has, in the last 9 years, killed 8 people. And supposedly throughout the course of this movie, we're supposed to believe that he was totally in the right every time because he's against the guys who plant the gun. He's against, he gets the excuse because the guy shoots the civilian to kill the other one. So it's like we're supposed to believe that he's justifiably, quote unquote, if that's even possible, to justifiably kill someone as a cop, which I think is a debate.
Just to quickly object, there's a point where, you know, they do like, I believe it's Frank who goes like, oh, all justified, right? And he goes, you know, like he essentially says like on paper. You know?
So he first said he never shot first. And then she's like, you never shot first? And he says, let me be clear. And says, I wrote it down here. I'm sorry. He says, I've never fired without just cause, which is clearly the phrase that Internal Affairs uses, right? So he's basically like, I've always gotten away with it. And we get a line later from, it's like the mayor's right-hand man or something who's like, I'd rather them be brought in than killed in a vague gunfight or something like this.
Yeah.
So it's like for this character to suddenly realize that there's corruption in the police force, it's like this guy is known and relishes in his reputation of having killed people and gotten away with it. It's like, and I brought it up in the chat. He brings up, so the movie starts with a Bible quote that's about his father who was killed in the line of duty, who very well could have been a corrupt cop himself. put himself in the situation to get killed even within the context of this movie, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But he's presented as it's Romans 13:4 for you guys who want to look at it. But they say, but if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So the movie starts off with presenting a fallen cop as a servant of God. And so it's like, here's the baseline. The justice system as God's true authority, which is just a completely absurd notion if you know anything about the legal system. Nothing to do with God. And so it starts there. In Internal Affairs, he thinks of himself as a warrior. He's using Civil War and World War II stories to seemingly justifying not being being one of the ones who's willing to shoot when others aren't able to, almost. And this is something that in real world, there are trainings called like warrior trainings for cops. Completely horrible. This, in terms of how I feel about policing, you should not fundamentally be thinking of civilians as an enemy. At that point,
Agreed.
You are no longer serving and protecting. You are thinking of who you're supposed to be protecting as an insurgent force, basically, to be controlled and handled. And so this is like a baseline that I think the movie never moves past. And the question that I ultimately came to is, does Boseman feel regret about the other people that he's supposedly had to kill? For me, even though he's jaded by this, I don't think he does. And this is why, in terms of reading this movie politically, I think it's not nearly doing what it could be in terms of talking about the real corruption within the police force. But in terms of this singular story, pointing out that obviously cops are on some level, cops' intelligence are involved with the drug trade. This is something that's been proven throughout the course of time. I obviously don't have any information to prove it right now, but this is very believable and shows how
I think there's known like found corruption cases where cops were, taking money from drug dealers and not reporting all the money they found and dealing with drug muling and all that stuff. Like that's stuff that has happened within police forces for sure. We can't confirm
to its credit, I think it is highlighting real corruption there. Obviously, we get J.K. Simmons giving the heart-wrenching plea of how sad they are, and some of them are alcoholics because they're cops and they can't afford to live in the city, and therefore they commit crime. It's
such a strange monologue from him because it comes at the very end of the film, and like you said, Brian, they're trying to get us to empathize with these people that we've seen be utterly corrupt for the last hour and a half.
Right.
And I mean, he's trying to convince Chadwick Boseman's character that they were in the right, but there's at that point in time as a viewer, there's nothing he could have said that could have convinced me otherwise that they were in the wrong.
He does flip, though, and it is well done. When he realizes that Boseman's not taking it, he flips into, I have the power here, actually. You're never going to get away with this.
Into the hard-ass persona, or the villainous persona.
I very much think this is true to reality in terms of how systems protect themselves, right?
Yeah, and that's where I fight back a little bit, is that first thing with Chadwick's character, people in movies are who we aspire to be. The person we follow is what we want to see in ourselves, right? And I don't think the movie ever forgives him for the things he's done. I don't think he forgives himself. I think that we are seeing unfortunately, something that's not realistic, but something I wouldn't put on this movie specifically, of characters breaking out of their previous flaws. That's oftentimes the basis of movies, right? And I'm
not sure he did. That's the thing. Did he? Do you think he ultimately? You think from now on, outside of this situation, and this is silly, we can't speculate on this,
right?
But it's even on second watch.
I mean, we can speculate.
We can speculate, but we have no idea. I just ultimately felt it was just about this specific circumstance more so than his previous reputation.
I think that what I could read into the movie, which is the movie leaves it vague, and it leaves it vague.
Yeah.
Probably for a reason, right? And this could be backstory that they helped build. Honestly, my thought is, and this is putting stuff on people and what you want to aspire to be, is that Chadwick actually put a lot more thought into the main character, with him being who he was and the cast being more diverse than maybe it was in the script, like that I'd even thought about, is that, you know, I get the feeling from my read of the movie is that a lot of like 90%, like he killed 11 people beforehand.
8, I think.
Yeah, 8 people in 9 years.
Like my thought is the way that it was just performed, because he's just an incredible actor, is that like 7 of them were definitely like situations in which he was under threat of violence and it was a violent actor and he took him down. And there's like 1 or 2 that he fucking regrets, that he's like, I fucked up and I got scared, because he's someone who carries himself with like a lot of like guilt. I do think he carries himself, as opposed to these other cops, with a sense of guilt, but he's justifying it just like they do, of like, this is what they had to do. You know, and he even has, I think it's a great line where he goes to settle down. I think the guy that he finds solace in, one of the bandits that makes it farther and gets the drives and whatever, where he goes like,
yeah, Trujillo.
You know, this will make some of us killers. And he's like talking about himself. He's like, I was built a killer from this.
He says some of us are killers.
Right.
And it's like, wow.
And I think he's like that. And then he sees the potential of like, if I didn't even follow this path, this is what I see in this other person. That's where there's a lot more humanity brought to this role. And again, film, something we aspire to. And it's like, I can see how it's triggering, because it's like, well, not enough cops will come to this realization. It's unrealistic, but I think that's an unrealistic aspiration of films in general, right? And our main character happens to be a cop. And I do feel this sense that there is more weight brought to the role in him. Like, again, I think he thinks a lot of them are justified, but there's something in him that is like, has been bothering him. And you can see when he sees his mother, when he's like, I'm really looking at the eye of the devil. And you can read that as like, I'm looking at criminality, but also like, I'm in a broken ass system. Like, the film is not this deep, but I think Chadwick knows that he needs to bring this to make it make sense for the
I think he's thinking on those levels.
Exactly, and I do feel that. Good.
No, how he, even more so on second viewing, because at some point he seems to at least question how other people view his reputation, and it's forcing him to maybe change and look back. The thing that I do want to bring up, that I brought up to you guys in the chat, that is a baseline that the plot of this movie accepts that is unrealistic, is the amount of violence that cops realistically experience in their careers. He should have been, in real life, if someone killed 8 people in 9 years and weren't fired, that's a broken system. Like, that's a movie in itself, how someone could kill 8 people in 9 years and basically be awarded by the system. So that's really, really dark. And I don't think the movie ultimately deals with that element. So I will say, I sent you guys an article about, I'm not saying that policing is not a dangerous job, but according to 2018 stats that I found, it was the 16th most dangerous job in terms of on-duty deaths in the United States, below a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily assume are particularly dangerous jobs. So for this one cop to be, and it's implied that most of the people he killed had killed cops, for him to be around that many is statistically ridiculous to a degree that's baffling. I just want to say, there's a specific line in this movie, and I'm glad I rewatched it, because it wasn't the character who said it that I thought. But in terms of like, I could not hear this and not think of the political implications of it. So there is a line where our characters, who, in terms of bad writing, this movie
has some bad writing, admittedly, for sure.
I will say, it has some bad writing, but they very conveniently track a car to a woman who owns it. They get a search warrant and just bust into her house with no notice, break her door down, and start beating the shit out of a guy that she's in bed with.
That was, Brian, you're pointing out what I perceive as the most problematic scene.
It 100%
Agreed.
is. It 100% is, Christian, because it feels like a direct reference. So the Black Lives Matter movement, which kicked off around 2014, largely after the killing of Eric Garner, who famously said, "I can't breathe," prior to being choked to death by a police officer for selling loose cigarettes. this guy who was being unjustifiably beat up and leaned on, the wife or the girlfriend says he can't breathe. And Chadwick Boseman, in one of the most cynical, disgusting lines of this movie, let me make sure I get it right. She says he can't breathe, and Boseman smugly leans over and says, if you kill him, he can't tell us anything. As if fucking civilians are like, their only use in surviving is to give information to the police. And then conveniently, this woman just knows every single perp involved in the, not only knows them, but grew up with them. Fucking preposterous plot wise, but it's also just a slap in the face to the death of Eric Garner. And it seems very directly in 2019 with how known his death was. That was an egregious line for me.
I'm not saying it's not. I won't defend a person I don't know and their intentions. I could say that the phrase "I can't breathe," as far as like something that happens in a tense situation in which people are being like smothered, it's a common thing. It could have been just ignorance to what that means. I'm not saying that it is.
You guys are willing to give a lot of people benefit of the doubt that I've lost, I think. So.
I just think that would be like just if you did that on purpose, it seems like it'd be more you know what I mean? It seems like if you intentionally wrote that in the type of film they were doing, because again, with one of the reasons why I don't come away going, wow, pure cop propaganda is like the police are corrupt. No one's happy at the end. It's not super like happy-go-lucky, heartwarming cop tale. Like it's a gritty.
It's not really being used as an instrument to recruit people.
I don't know if anybody watches this and goes like, I fucking want to be a cop. Chadwick Boseman seems pretty miserable. And if anything, it's a Chadwick Boseman going, I should have not followed this career path because my dad was a cop, right? Like the movie doesn't.
He absolutely never gets there though. Right? He never gets that far into the logic.
No, I don't. I agree, but the film does not. It's not like, The Patriot, where it's like I have to serve my country. I don't end.
Okay, well,
I don't. Well, what I'm saying, but that's
an interesting bar to set. But
well, that's a delineation between like what's pure propaganda, what's entertainment, and what's a fucking American cop story. Where it's not like I don't come across going like, man, I don't know who would come across and be like, I'd fucking love to be a cop, and you know what I mean? Like to me, it doesn't come across that way. So to intentionally do that, to mock something like that, it just doesn't seem purposeful. But that's just my reading, and it's a limited scope that I have on it.
I hope it wasn't intentional. It would be insanely bad faith. But again, I'm bringing my personal background and my knowledge into this movie. So for me, hearing that line after already being skeptical about where the movie was going, that was just like the final straw. Like, Jesus Christ.
And it's really? If anything, and not to defend it, it's saying that like it's still bad that like you didn't consider that. That's still a bad thing. Like I'm not defending it and like, oh, they're holier
it's
because
tone deaf at best, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Tone deaf at best is a really good way to put it. Where I'm not coming across as defensive, I'm going across like they probably didn't notice, probably wasn't intentional, but man, it's
that in and of itself is a problem.
Absolutely. Right. I agree, and I think that's like the context around talking about this movie that is important, which is just like, hey, filmmakers making movies about cops, you should probably think about a lot of like
be a little more cognizant.
Yeah, 100%. And Brian, for that, I'm grateful that you bring up these great points. But I
apologize for getting a little passionate.
No, I had to fucking somewhat defend police force, and I don't like taking that stance. It just makes interesting podcasting, Brian, okay? Ugh. A bad cop is worse than a bad person, hands down. A bad police institution is fucking toxic to a community, and it's awful. And to have what we want to aspire to be law enforcement, to see them fuck up so royally and literally take away civil liberties because they have a badge is fucking disgraceful. And there should be more movies about how disgraceful that is. And I think Brian's just really sad this wasn't that movie. I'm also sad. I really would have appreciated Chadwick Boseman in a great movie about holding law enforcement accountable.
That would have been awesome.
Would have been fantastic.
I also want to say I've enjoyed cop movies before. And, I watched Spiral this year, which didn't help because Spiral, it very much uses all the tropes, but it's got a level of tongue-in-cheek that this movie doesn't at all have. So I do think that and Spiral is far from like an amazing movie either. Yeah. But I think I can still enjoy cop movies.
And to wrap this up, but to wrap it up, I think there is a larger context in which we can view these as far as media as a whole. I think to Chris's point, holding the individual creators and what I genuinely think, this is all about Chadwick Boseman. What Chadwick Boseman actually brings, it saves this movie from being straight up all political pandering and all bullshit. I do think he brings legitimate weight despite the bad acting or bad writing.
The bad writing
of the film. I believe he brings a reality that if it wasn't someone like him, even if it was just Denzel Washington, right, who would be your default casting, black actor choice for this film, I think Chadwick Boseman is bringing something nuanced and interesting despite some failures in the construction of the script. And in kind of wrapping that up, I think that wholly there needs to be more things on hey, let's actually look at law enforcement's relationship and maybe take a deeper look and be more thoughtful about the things we create that involve American law enforcement, especially in New York. I mean, New York law enforcement is has a very long and storied interaction with their population that is worth checking out. But I am interested. One of my first things was when we first started talking about this was hey, when was the last time you saw The Departed? All the cops suck in that, and it's very traditionally a cop movie. And how do you look at that, right?
See, yeah, I said it, but I haven't seen that since high school. I think you showed it to me at some point in high school, and I haven't watched it since. So I was watching movies completely differently back then, But it's definitely worth revisiting. I may have talked about it on the pod, but I just watched Heat for the first time, which is from the 90s, and that movie was incredible. So again, it's it can be well done, and obviously this is the great police movie that everyone tries to copy. So obviously that's a high bar, but even things like Seven, like David Fincher's Seven, it's there's a lot of good stuff where you can have complicated characters involved in this system that are still interesting stories,
Yeah, absolutely. In wrapping up, the political statement, let us know what you think. Pop-O-Holicscast@gmail.com. How do you watch cop movies now? Does it bother you? Does it not? I'm interested to hear. What are some of our favorite moments from this movie?
All right, I'm going to start off.
I'll keep it brief. Okay, Brian, you go for it.
I'm the contentious one here. There's a few moments. The first one, which I appreciated, it was kind of mind-blowing on both viewings, and I'm sure on a big screen it would have been even more incredible. But in the first scene we get at the funeral, we get a shot from above the church, and we see all the cops who are standing still and then salute as the casket is brought out, and it's just this wave of white that crescendos over probably 200 people or something. And it was just, I texted you guys, it's just absolute cinema joy. Beautiful, effective, powerful, emotional stuff that
it's overall a very nicely shot movie. It almost
I agree.
It's weird though, because sometimes it is in dark, it looks like The Dark Knight sometimes, and it kind of has this,
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Has this semi theatrical look to it, which is, it's kind of,
I think it also has to do with the score as well, though. I think the combination of the cinematography and the score lend itself to having that Dark Knight Christopher Nolan vibe.
Yeah, which is strange because it's just not that kind of story, right? It should be more shaky cam. It should be more in the shit kind of thing.
It's got a bit of that though.
It's got a bit of it, but it goes for these big, bold, very classic Hollywood and kind of graphic novel shots, even though it is just a cop procedural, which I don't know if it's, I don't know if I look back and think, oh, it's elevating it, or if it's just wrong time and place for this type of story. But it is an interesting element that I think is executed well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that was visually one of my favorite moments. The chase scene that the movie builds up to, it starts in the street, it goes into a kitchen restaurant area. They're sliding around, jumping over things. It's probably the best part of the movie for me.
I also love from a character moment that the antagonist that's left, one of the criminals. He's in a suit and he looks great, and you're just part of that broke my heart because I was oh, this person could have just been someone very capable, someone else, and that was really kind of hard to watch because I'm like, oh, he could have just been like an entrepreneur or something, you know? It's like...
No, and we even get his backstory, you know, with his brother dying young, and the woman character who tells us who he is, gives us his backstory, even says something like, had he grown up in a different situation, he could have been great or something like this. But to that point, so yes, I agree. The chase scene, we get Boseman's moment of choice to allow the cops to kill him or to get on the subway with him and take his chances confronting him one-on-one. And it builds up to the scene where he gets shot by Frankie Burns. And the look on Stephen James's face, who's playing Michael Trujillo, and it's just, he's saying so much. He's just saying, how could you? I trusted you. You know, there's this genuine moment of both characters coming to terms with something, and the fact that it's taken away, especially the second time even more so, it was pretty effective. And I think it's largely due to his acting. The way he sells that moment is really, really powerful, I thought.
No, my theme of this whole movie is that the actors make this movie way better than it has any right to be, for sure. Like,
I think,
they
yeah,
sell that so well. Chris, what are some of your favorite moments?
No, like I said, I'm going to keep it brief. The one moment that cracked me up on both viewings, it's probably maybe like a 5-minute segment of the film, but it's when the feds first arrive and J.K. Simmons and Chadwick Boseman are trying to like negotiate what they're going to do to catch these guys and how much time they're going to have available to catch them. And the portion of this scene starts off with J.K. Simmons bashing the mayor for eating pizza with a fork.
Yes.
And initially I was like, that's one of the most New York things I've ever heard anybody say in a film. But then it proceeds, it continues with Chadwick going and naming all the boroughs, and then he's talking about like the tri-state area, and talking about like Jersey and Utica, and I'm listening to this scene and I'm laughing out loud because I'm like, I feel like I'm watching the fucking Californians on SNL. Have you guys ever seen that sketch?
Yeah, if you just take
where they
the
just basically
401
list
up into Berkeley, you get off on Santa Cruz, you do that.
They just list a bunch of local roads and like landmarks and places. And that's how I felt this scene was kind of mapped out in the script. It was just like, how many local roads and locations can we list in this small 5-minute segment? And I think that just speaks to how silly the writing can be in certain points in this film. But yeah, on both viewings, I was like, this is the funniest
also,
shit
Chadwick Boseman
I've
implying that like they're going to fill the city with blow is so weird. Very strange.
Fill the city with blue.
Oh, I thought he said blow. Like he's like, let him sell the cocaine. I thought he was saying, let's let him sell
hilarious.
the cocaine. Oh my God, I thought that's what he was saying.
We're going to shut down, close the bridges, shut down the rivers, close the tunnels, and we're going to fill the city with blue.
I swear to God, I thought that.
No, he says they're going to flood the city with blue.
Yeah. Oh, yes. No, I get it. No, I get it.
I know. I just want, just in case.
I get it.
I wish that was the line. That would be even.
It would be a totally different movie. He just turns into Scarface.
I thought he was like, we'll follow the high people. We'll follow the people that won't stop won't stop talking about their screenplay they're trying to pitch. Just look for a motherfucker who looks like Tarantino, just rambling on about feet or something. We'll get the guys.
Yikes.
We'll catch them. No, I like so much about this movie from like moment to moment, from like what is the coolest like episode of Law and Order that you could have. Like that's honestly the bar that I put it at. It's like a really action-packed episode of Law and Order for all the foibles that entails. I love the John Wick moment where we get the guy, the cleaner, the person that like cleans the money.
Yeah.
I think that's a super tense scene. I think like throughout the movie stays tense in a really fun, exciting way as far as like what you want from one of these action movies. From like, what are our criminals going to do? I think I invested in like...
I think that the time limit is what allows that tension to, kind of permeate throughout the whole film. They only have a couple of hours to find these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I love when they show up and this guy's got all this knowledge and he's just like the fixer for this, and they're having to trust him. We get a little moment. I genuinely like our PTSD killer war veteran guy He's got the chip, and he's like, give me a scotch.
Oh, the moment where he puts the chip down?
And he's like, give me a scotch.
Sad.
It's like, yeah, whatever, movie. This
his hand shaking a bit. He's got
Yeah, and I know we're on favorite moments, but I think another Brian, you brought up an egregious moment where he comes in and just slaps the woman. He's like, I'm a cop, so fuck you. That's probably where I felt the most like, oh, this is very dirty. I think the second moment that I felt.
And the fact that he literally solves the case because of his busting into the home and beating the shit out of these people.
Hey, listen, waterboarding's cool if it works, right? Right?
And it doesn't work, for the record, folks. It doesn't.
Yeah, but films are what we aspire, and we want waterboarding to work, Brian.
No.
God. What was it gonna... Fuck, I lost it. Damn it. I lost it when we brought that up. It's when he slaps... I said it's the most unrealistic moment.
Was it Becky with the good hair?
Not Becky with the good hair.
My God. What, like, even in 2019, reference. It's like, I'm pretty sure Lemonade came out in 2016, the song where this is referencing. And, like, we have Frankie Burns is like enough of a Beyonce fan where she's using shorthand for cheating as Becky with the good hair. An absolutely ridiculous moment in this movie where not only does she understand it, but the woman she's talking to understands it. It's like, okay.
Oh, answers her immediately.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah. And yeah, I'm trying to give you some time here, because for those of you guys who don't know, Becky also slang for blowjob. So it's multiple levels there.
I think I want you to keep Beyonce and coming up with
line.
Other Beyonce references. Other dated Beyonce references. You know, honestly, I slipped. I'm going to be so pissed. I'm going to wake up at 3 a.m. and be like, it was the scene with the hat. Or something. I don't know. It wasn't important enough that I kept it. It was something that popped in my head. I referenced something else. Now it's gone. And you know what? It's gone forever. Any final thoughts with 77 Bridges?
Let's bring it back to Chadwick. Boseman's great in this movie. I think the character is unrealistic, and I have my quibbles with the movie. But Boseman's good in it throughout, and he's doing pretty much as he can with this screenplay, and ultimately makes it significantly more watchable than it would have been with someone of less talent, for sure.
No, indeed.
Yeah, despite the writing, he proves that he's still a leading man.
Oh, yeah.
And, this month is about celebrating him, and it's tragic that we won't get to see him in any more leading roles.
Could have carried other good movies and other bad movies. Or like, at least Chadwick was in it. He was good.
Right.
And I wouldn't describe it, despite, what we've talked about, like, contextually problematic about the writing. I do think that this movie is, like, fine. Which is worthwhile. I think that's worth noting. The movie, to me, despite some of its problematic elements, is a fine thriller. Like, if you're, again, your dad, maybe he's not super progressive. You're going to pop this on. It's not going to offend him. He's going to like it.
Probably a safe bet.
It's a safe dad flick, for sure. All right. Maybe one day I'll remember what the fuck I was thinking of in referencing an unrealistic part of this film. But, it's lost to the ages. That is 21 Bridges. It is available. I cashed in on my girl got Showtime on Hulu, so I was able to not.
Very nice.
Yeah. So,
excellent.
I did have to watch an ad.
I paid twice to rent this movie, guys. So
no,
I did.
Double back.
And this is what I do for the pod. So
I mean, I bought this movie last year on iTunes, so I own it now.
Oh, nice. I should have bought it because I paid nearly the amount that it would have been to bought it to rent it twice. But
that's why I just buy it. Like, who knows? Maybe I'll have to catch it another time. Chris, what are we talking about next week?
Christian, next week we're going to be wrapping up our celebration of Chadwick Boseman with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, the most contemporary film. Well, the last film that he did. So I'm excited to watch this. I haven't seen it yet.
Amazing. Oh, I thought of the thing. Holy shit.
Yes.
Okay, most egregious thing in this film before. I know, it's fucking up the whole thing. Chadwick doesn't even blink when a citizen is just shot in the crossfire. Like, he doesn't even care. Mm-hmm. He's just like, that was probably going to be me, and I'm just lucky.
In fact, he uses it to his advantage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Terrible. Awful.
Agreed.
Anyway. R.I.P. Chadwick.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
R.I.P. Chadwick. Yeah, I'm excited for you guys to see this one.
Yeah, it's music-based again, so obviously I'm a big fan. Jazz. Old
Viola Davis as well. Completely transformed.
Again. Yeah.
Very cool. So look forward to that. You can find us on all our social media, Pop-O-Holics@gmail.com. Questions, comments, concerns. You can also subscribe on our YouTube channel. We do some video reviews and we do the video for Brian's Wacky News Corner every week. So subscribe there. Gentlemen, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
Loyal listeners, you can find me on Twitter @Chris Conkling, talking about all things nerdy, comic books, television, movies, video games, collectibles. If it's nerdy, I'm talking about it.
And you can find me @True Pop-O-Holic.
You can find my band at Midnight Satire. New stuff coming out soon. September 10th. Stuff. Don't wait till October 10th. Unless
I want to know what's on those drives.
I will show you what's on those drives. I've got it on the
Cool hand.
Very cool. Thank you again, boys. Always a pleasure doing this. We got a little spicy today. We kept it in check. We kept it going. And ultimately, I look almost like an idiot when I forgot a very unimportant scene that no one.
It came back to you.
No, you got there.
We got there.
It did. I just saw that. You know what it was? I thought of Pete Davidson getting his
another
comeuppance. In this film was the same kind of thing, but in the wrong film. It was like the same scene, but in like the wrong context, and did not land with the same level of comedy. All right, that'll do it. We look forward to next week on